Hi everyone, hope you had a good break. Jon, are you happy for me to go straight into session 2, or did you want to provide an introduction?
Hi there. It's great to see you. In the next hours, we will be heading into the session 2, as David was talking about. It's university branding and advertising to support the recruitment of international students in the COVID-19 era. And David will do the first session by himself. It's brand-led marketing, communications, full funnel engagement with prospective international students in uncertain times. It's a great title, a long one, but it will definitely be a great speech by David, so I look forward to listen to that. Following that will be international recruitment strategies during and after the pandemic by Kathleen Ikas-Öhler from Eötvös Loránd University of Budapest. Then we will have Aswin Luciana, social media specialist, generally dressed in yellow, from the University of Luxembourg. Let's see if he won't be wearing a yellow shirt. I'm sure he will be. Last but not least, we will have switching from blended to digital only international student recruitment strategies in a fast-moving pandemic situation, and it will be done by Daisy Bocci, project coordinator international marketing and recruitment from the Vrije University or Universiteit in Brussels, not in Amsterdam. And I'm not going to have this any longer, but just to give you a point on how things are here, just for the last 4 hours in Iceland, we have had around 10 earthquakes, and none of them really harsh, but this is quite common, and most of these earthquakes are linked to volcanoes, and they are always letting us know of their existence. And one of them is quite close to Reykjavik, really, so there'll be like really a lot of turbulence there for the last few months. But David Smith.
Thanks, Jon. And I can report no earthquakes in London, although we have had a lot of rain today, but that's fairly common for us. Thank you for the floor, and I will go straight into my presentation, as you said. We'll go through the same format as we did in session 1. We'll do the 4 presentations, and then we'll take questions at the end, and I'll facilitate.
Sorry, David. Something cracking in the sound. I'm not sure if it's the same with everybody who is listening to your lecture, but
yes, I hear it too.
Yeah, it's the same.
It might be something with the plugin. Check out, please, if it's like fully plugged.
Yeah, I've turned my camera off because it could be a connection issue.
No, it's still the same with the sound.
Oh, okay, let me check my connection.
Yeah, so while we wait for David to show up again, it's
trying again. Is this?
It's awesome. It's crystal clear.
Excellent. Okay, sorry, I unplugged and plugged back in.
Please go ahead.
Thank you. So, yeah, sorry about that. Yeah, I'll go straight into my presentation, and we'll then follow on with the subsequent presentations and do the questions at the end. I will facilitate the questions at the end, so do put them in the chat as we go along, and we'll ask them. So without any further ado, I'll share my screen. Hopefully you can see this just coming up. And I'll just start the presentation. So yeah, I'm going to be talking about brand-led communications, full funnel engagement with prospective students in international students in uncertain times. Before I get into the topic, just to kind of give you a little bit of background in terms of myself, I first joined one of these UNICA workshops focused on PR and communications 8 years ago. So, and I've attended 7 of the last 8. So I've been involved in the network, in the workshop for many, many years. And a lot has changed in that time. I think that technology has advanced significantly. I think the professionalism of marketing, PR, communications practices within universities has really come on a lot in that time. And obviously there's been a significant change within the last year in terms of the kind of external environment that we're operating in. And I remember last year in Cyprus, us spending a little bit of time at the end of the workshop talking about possible challenges that we'd face in the coming year, and what we might talk about in this year's workshop in Budapest. And I think none of us, it's fair to say that none of us anticipated what has actually happened. So it's been really useful to kind of hear everyone's views on it, and we've got some really interesting views across the 4 speakers in this session this afternoon as well. So I just wanted to start off by talking about potential barriers to international student recruitment. The first is relatively obvious, it's finances, and I think colleagues from Sapienza touched on this point. There is a kind of concern from international students around the affordability of higher education, whether that's that they've been directly impacted by the pandemic, or if there's concerns that the ongoing pandemic and associated financial downturn will impact on their ability to be able to afford and pay for something as kind of significant as studying abroad at an institution. Travel is also a key factor, and I think that from a UK perspective, at least, the way that it's worked out this year has been interesting, because travel was, pretty much locked down for a lot of the pandemic, and actually restrictions lifted just in time for us to be able to welcome students from across the globe, the impacts of which obviously have been well reported, but I think that it still is a consideration for some students in terms of the ability to be able to travel internationally. I think health is a key concern as well, whether anyone's been directly impacted by coronavirus, or if it's a concern about what traveling will do to them, or what might happen to their family. It's definitely a potential barrier to international students thinking about studying outside of their home country. Student life is obviously going to be a big concern as well. So their kind of access to campus. A lot of universities doing blended learning or online learning as well. So obviously that gives them a different experience to the one that they had anticipated, I guess, and that perhaps not reflecting value for money for them is a consideration. And I've also put in a UK specific factor here as well, not related to the pandemic, but Brexit. And who would have thought 12 months ago that there would be something even more disastrous than Brexit in coronavirus. So there's certainly a lot of challenges for international student recruitment. But just to give you a picture in terms of how international student recruitment has looked in the UK, at least, these are international students placed at UK universities over the last 10 years. And as you can see, particularly for England, there has been a fairly healthy increase and a particular incline in the last 2 or 3 years. And 2020 obviously hasn't taken a hit on that. I would caveat this saying these are placed students, so students that have received a place at a UK university according to UCAS. Whether they materialise into enrolments is a slightly different discussion. I think at the University of East London, where I work, we are seeing some fairly positive signs, and we have seen some fairly positive signs in terms of enrolments. But I know that that has been a slower process than previous years, and I'd be interested to hear from other universities on their experiences in terms of international student recruitment. So that's just a bit of context setting, and I wanted to then talk around the kind of full funnel communications that I kind of alluded to in the title of my presentation. And this is a relatively standard marketing term and a fairly standard marketing model. but I appreciate that not everyone will have come across this and used this. So broadly, the marketing funnel is the journey for a customer from finding out about a brand or a product all the way through to them purchasing that brand or product. And I do want to take a minute just to recognize that the use of some of the terminology that I've kind of used there can be seen as uncomfortable for some universities. I think even in a highly marketized sector such as the one that I work in the UK, using customer instead of student and product instead of course is seen as controversial, and I can appreciate that that might be the case across other institutions as well. My view on this is that there is a financial transaction, there is a choice for international student recruitment, and therefore it does make sense to have that kind of commercial outlook on it. So the funnel, as I'm kind of referring to, is really representing the top where there's a lot of awareness, or we as marketing and communications professionals are driving awareness of our institution, to then people being interested in us as a brand in our courses. Then that pool kind of shrinks. So there's some of those people that are interested will then consider us as an option. Then some of those people considering us will then show the intent to engage with us or to kind of apply to us. Then some of that group will then evaluate us and choose us and ultimately enroll, so kind of take us to that purchase decision. And really the kind of aim of international student recruitment is for us to take prospective students through that journey. So there's those kind of 3 key stages of lead generation, lead nurture and sales. And we can translate that across to actually the student journey, or at least the student journey in terms of a recruitment process. So from when they might first hear about a university, might first engage with our website or us on social media, through to us then specifically talking to them once we've kind of captured them as a lead, following up with emails, invited them along to open events, be it virtual or physical, to them actually making an application, and then going on to enroll. So I think that the kind of important point here in light of the ongoing pandemic is really that a lot of international students would have started this journey way before the pandemic. A lot of the students that were in this journey for this September would have been towards the end of this funnel, so they would have had a lot of engagement with us prior to this point. And I think that what I'm going to touch on is really the importance of adaptability, but also the importance of consistency in terms of the messaging that we're pushing out to this group and to other groups as well. So I wanted to then just touch on brand-led marketing communications. So this is really an important part for several reasons. First of all, that consistency of message that I was talking about. So so that someone recognizes a brand and understands the kind of advantage of a particular brand or a particular university, that consistency needs to kind of go throughout that entire student journey. It's also important to get your value proposition across to a university. So how do we as a university, as a brand, provide value to that student over them going to another university? And to that point, giving them a point of differentiation as well. So how do we differ to a university in the same country or a different country that offers the same course and says broadly the same things? Being brand aligned means that we can actually show how we are different and why they should choose us over another institution. And finally, authenticity. And I think this is a really important point when it comes to brand communications, because in terms of branding, there's 2 sides to the story. There's what we say, and then there is what people believe and what people feel. And that's really this, you know, we as marketing and communications professionals push out messages, we position our institutions, but actually the way that that's perceived is really where the brand is. It sits in that intersection of what we say and do and actually how it's perceived. So it's an important aspect for us to focus on. So just to kind of align in that to the student journey, then it's really important that we have that kind of brand message that sits across the entirety of the student journey, all of these various different communications, different touch points, need to be kind of brand aligned to provide that consistency. But that's not saying that all of these messages are the same. I think it's really important that there is a specific approach to our communications within these areas. So at the University of East London, we focused on 3 key messaging pillars, really, in terms of communicating. So the first one is practical. So this is the kind of essential information that we need to get across, and we often kind of push that out across our owned channels. So the channels that we have control of, our website, our social media channels, our email communications. And that's really course information about how to apply, about our facilities, and other factors as well. There's then the inspirational, so the content that really inspires. So that's across rich media channels, so video, for example, long form podcasts and so on, and across a range of paid and owned channels as well. So that could be case studies, that could be impact stories, graduate outcomes, accolades and achievements, really to kind of gauge and excite the prospective student. And then finally, there's the kind of authentic messaging. So this is kind of really to speak more specifically to the to the advancement of technology. And a lot of people are kind of, you know, it's not that a brand can push out a message anymore and for that to be believed. A lot of trust and a lot of authenticity comes from that peer-to-peer engagement, content that comes from users, and content that sits across social media. And I know that Aswin's going to talk a bit more about social media in the next session. So we've been taking an approach in all of these pillars to our messaging. Of course, that's been aligned to the university's brand, and we've had the brand running across all of those messages. The other important point to get across is that we've had to adapt our approach to all of these messaging pillars in light of the pandemic. So in terms of practical information, we've really had to kind of focus that down on what will your student experience be like, how will you learn? And in a survey in the UK of students across the sector, it was the #1 most important factor in them making a choice of which university to study. If they had clear and concise information about actually what their post-pandemic experience would look like, that is the university that they'd choose. Our inspirational content, it still needs to inspire, but we still have been addressing the fact that there is a global pandemic going on, and really trying to get across the story behind our community, getting across the story behind how we've positively reacted to the pandemic. And that authentic pillar as well, we've really had to give our students and our alumni the best experience throughout the pandemic, for them to be able to go on and advocate us as a brand to as a university to other prospective students. So going back to the student journey again, while it's really important that we've got that that core brand-led messaging across the student journey, it's also important that there's segmentation as well. And I don't just mean that we take a different approach to each one of these different touch points and different communications, but also we're considering the differences in regions, the differences in levels, in subjects, in demographics. And that really gives us the ability to be personalized with the way that we communicate with prospective students. I think that channel selection is also a really important one, and we can map this to that student journey as well. At different parts of the student journey, we'll use some or all of these different channels. Paid media is obviously the kind of paid advertising that we push out there. Owned media I talked about, and being on across the channels that we have an ownership of, and the content that we create and push out via those channels. Shared is social media, and earned is really one of the kind of the valuable areas, because it is that that kind of trusted voice. It's not coming from us, someone else is endorsing us as an institution. And there's obviously intersections in between these different media channels, but important that there's a consistency of brand across all of them and a consistency of message. And ultimately that brings you to a seamless student journey. So just using some examples from the University of East London, Our homepage of our website has changed dramatically. Usually we'd always be pushing the kind of recruitment message, but we'd have a lot more of our brand level messaging there. We've had to adapt that to be a lot more focused on how we're responding to the pandemic, but also including at the bottom there some of our kind of brand content as well. This is a platform that we've got called UniBuddy. It's a peer-to-peer engagement platform. It's where our students can speak to prospective students. And it's, like I said earlier, important that our students are having a good experience so that they can put that across in the interactions that they have. Really important that we get our brand across in search. So when people are on Google looking for us, we've had to adapt our approach, as other universities have already shown in this workshop, to events. And we've got a series of online events that people can consume from the comfort of their homes, and also the messages that we push out across our page and our owned channels. And I just wanted to finish on the final point, and it's really this point that content is king. A quote from Bill Gates from 1996, so a long time ago, but it was when the internet was really starting to explode. And I think the point was that it's not okay for brands anymore just to say something. They need to kind of prove that, and they need to inspire, and they need to engage with prospective students. And I think if we can do that with our international students across that journey and align what we're saying to our brand messaging, then we can really put ourselves in the best possible position during the pandemic. So I'm going to leave it there. That's the end of my presentation. And as I said,